Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today is a good day. Any day we get to talk about long range precision shooting. Well, for me, it's just a joy. But we have a special guest on today, world champion, just out there making everybody look just a little worse, I think. I don't want to say bad because everybody was really good, but you definitely did some work out there. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Just living my best life. I'm really excited. I reloaded 200 rounds today, so it was a little bit of work, but got it done, and we're
Good.
ready for the weekend, and now we get to do
Yeah.
this, so I'm
I
excited.
know. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited. I think a lot of people are excited because any time where you can maybe get a few tips and tricks and
Mhm,
insights from, the people out there that are really doing well, it's nice, right?
mhm,
Before we
mhm.
sort of jump into that, I do want to ask, how long have you been shooting?
I so I have been competing since September of 2020, but actually I shot a gun for the first time when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And I grew up in a household where my dad emphasized firearm safety, and
Mhm.
I grew up hunting with him. And so my entire life, I've been around pistols, shotguns, rifles, but didn't start competing and did not. I did not have an interest in competing in any firearm discipline whatsoever until I was 17, and
Okay.
he brought it to my attention. He found some local NRL clubs and PRS videos, and he was like, "Hey, we should do this." And yeah, that was 5 years ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast time goes,
Yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely.
definitely, especially, like, if you're getting into stuff right around that COVID time, right? It's like
Yes.
everything feels like a blur from that time.
It
Uh,
really
yeah, where my wife and I were talking about some of this stuff, and I was like, has it been that long, really? Because it just felt
Mhm.
like that time was just frozen, it's what it
Yes.
felt like.
Yeah.
But that was one of the nice things about, if you were the type of person that liked to be outside, right? Because you could still go on
Right.
hikes. And if you could still go to the gun range, right? If it's an
Mhm.
outdoor range and things like that. And
Mhm.
so that was a really cool time to be able to like go out and still do things, right?
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. It was we built our a precision rifle during COVID, and it was one of those where it's just like we were waiting for matches to start back up, and yeah, then in September we competed for the first time.
And did you do like any other sports, or would you consider yourself a fairly competitive person?
Hmm, I am very competitive. I can turn it off like a light switch to where I do not care, but when I am on the range, I am so insanely competitive, and I didn't grow up doing any sports, but I did dance actually for 13 years, and I was a dance teacher, and that was my life growing up was dance. So then jumping into a competitive sport and then shooting discipline was very much a 360 for me.
How do you feel? So I grew up coaching. I've talked about that on the podcast. I was coach
Mhm.
swimming and I coach
Yeah,
wrestling for 15 years. Do you
yeah.
feel like from that perspective, right, of being able of like teaching, it's a
Mhm.
little easier to like learn these, like
Yeah.
learning. You look at it from the
Mhm.
capacity of where it's like, how would I teach this to somebody? And then I'm just going to teach it to
Oh.
myself. You ever
Yeah.
feel like that?
That is such a good perspective that I maybe haven't necessarily thought it that exact way, but I do know that, there were times where I was teaching dance and I would think to myself like, I wish that this person had more of a teachable spirit. And
Mhm.
so when I started shooting, I knew that I wouldn't excel or wouldn't get better if I was closed off to, new ideas or wouldn't take basically critiques and, recommendations. And so it was about 2 or 3 months after I started shooting is when or started competing, when I realized I kind of want to see where this could go. And it was one of those where, since I had that deep desire to be like, okay, how far could I take this? I was willing to soak it all in. And there are some times where if somebody's talking to me I will then repeat it back to them in a certain way, and then I think that is kind of a loop of my teacher coming out of, "You're saying this, could it also be taken like this?" Does that make sense? And so I think that that mindset does come in handy, and I know I've done a few classes, over the last little bit where I enjoy teaching, and it took me back to my dancing days when I was teaching little girls how to dance, and it's very different now, it's not little girls in tutus, but it's grown men's with guns, but, and I do love teaching, and I think it also goes back to people have poured into me, I wanna pour back into the community.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's exactly how I've felt about this
Mhm.
process for myself, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
My entire sort of like perspective on this was it was so hard to find information or like
Mhm.
try to navigate through the arguments that were happening in forums.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
I was sort of like, I want to be able to consolidate information. I want to be able to
Mhm.
bring people who I think
Mhm.
are reputable, who you should be
Mhm.
following, companies and books and magazines, and just like be a resource on that front. And that's
Mhm.
really how I sort of got into it. And the
Mhm.
podcast has been an extension of that because it's been
Yeah.
like, okay, let's hear the voices of the people that are in this community.
Right.
And obviously, we love talking about shooting, and shooting is fun, and
Mhm.
that's why most people are here. But I think, you guys are all more than just the shooting, right? And
Mhm.
to get that background and that perspective on who
Yeah.
you are and what sort of what that leads into is really important to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been doing some stuff with modern day sniper, and
Mhm.
they're like 50-50 on like holistic belief and like,
Mhm.
really like taking note of who you are and how you function. And then the other side is like hardcore sniper, like shooting stuff, right? It's a
Yeah.
really interesting dynamic. And
Yes.
so sort of
Yes.
like thinking about that, right? Like
Mhm.
I definitely obviously want to talk about worlds, but I just want to talk about like shooting as it pertains to your life as a whole, right?
Absolutely,
What is
yeah.
that like for you?
That's a really good question. It is shooting, competing, precision rifle is right now what I literally live, breathe, eat, sleep. It is pretty much all consuming of my day. It's this year I've struggled finding the balance of being a competitor versus working in the industry versus making an impact in the industry. And, when I look at opportunities, it's like, okay, is this going to better my career? Is this going to better me as a competitor? Um, I love the firearm industry. For the first time, I went to SHOT Show this year, and that was just eye-opening of how many people pour their heart and soul into the firearm industry. And that's where I really realized that I am a part of it. And I am very blessed to be sponsored by companies inviting me to go, and I was able to see them thrive at SHOT Show. And this year and last year were huge in my shooting journey. And for the last 2 years, I've worked for the Precision Rifle series. And so every fiber of my being wants shooting to be successful, whether that is in my own shooting journey, whether that is growing the PRS to be, a really large and continuously growing sport, or just shooting. We're living in times where our rights to be firearm owners and to own certain gear that's being threatened. And I'm not gonna get really political right now, but it's a little scary, and so knowing that all of us are also playing a part in showing people that it can be done safely and well, and I'm also part of that. I mean, every time I step onto the range, it is my responsibility to be a good steward of my rights and to be safe with my firearm, and so, yeah, I mean, I am immersed in shooting, and actually, this may come to a shock to some people, but at the end of this year, I kinda started dabbling in a few different shooting disciplines, and that's been fun, like shooting more, like, gas guns and ARs and shotguns and pistols, and I think that's also just broadened my horizons to what else is out there, and the opportunities are endless, let's be honest, of what you can do in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of my big thing when I was like, okay, I'm gonna focus on content creation in this space.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I felt like I just couldn't choose. I'm like, I just love all long range shooting. And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm just gonna cover it all. And I was like, maybe it's not niche enough. I don't know. But like,
Yep.
I really do. And so, and it's been so fun, right? Like, getting to
Mhm.
know airgun and ELR and bench rest and F class and
Yeah.
PRS and all of
Mhm.
these different sports. I will say there's always room for you over in F class if you ever want to come and do some
Yeah.
competition. You know, they love it. They're one of my.
Yeah.
I swear I bring her up on every podcast, but she was on one of the podcasts. Her name is
Yeah.
Shiloh. She's a 13-year-old girl
Oh
who
my
just set
gosh.
7 national records.
See?
Um,
Go
she's
girl.
really, really good, and apparently her sister, who is 8, is beating her sometimes.
Oh my gosh.
Mm,
Man, that family
yeah.
has some talent running through their
Yeah, they're
veins. Oh my
really impressive.
gosh.
So, there's plenty of room for you over here on this side, but,
Love it.
you know, that's great. I love to hear that. I mean, it's sort of when you decide to make this, I guess, a career, sort of like we
Mhm.
have, although we're a little different, but, in
Mhm.
that way, it sort of feels like everything you're doing every day as you wake up, right? I was like, this morning, I was
Mhm.
like, I have to finish these reloads because I have a networking event on Saturday. I have the
Yeah.
podcast. I have like this. Right? Do you ever
Mhm.
have time to still go dance, right? Or, you know,
Mhm.
what are the things that you're doing outside of the sport that keep you,
Mhm.
level?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and this is when I'm gonna be brutally honest with you and say this year I took Worlds very seriously, as did everybody that was there. And, the opportunity was a huge blessing, and I very much treated it like even though it wasn't my first time going to Worlds, 'cause I went 2 years ago, I treat it like a once in a lifetime. I didn't want to be at the end of Worlds thinking, "Oh, I wish I would have done this, or I could have done that." And so I actually just made my end of year recap stats where I figured out um, how many matches I shot and how much I was away from home. And actually, from January to the first weekend in November, I was away. Um, Basically, like, if I were to take all the weekends, like, 65%, and I was only home, 45%, or
Mhm,
no, that would've been 35%, which is a little bit crazy, but also right now I'm feeling it because I did not take time this year to do things that filled my cup back up.
mhm,
For me, it was all or nothing shooting.
mhm,
I will say so I took a little over a month long trip overseas in May. So when I got back from that, it was really pedal to the metal. I was gone consistently every other weekend, sometimes back to back weekends, out of state shooting matches, testing ammo, shooting. I ended up having to have my barrel redone 5 weeks before Worlds, which was so scary to think about and try to process through. Because I was like, "Oh, we're leaving for England next month.
mhm.
Joy." And
Well, and to
looking
get it done that quickly, like for a lot of people who don't know, it can take 3 months to get your barrel back, right? So
Mhm.
you're
Yeah.
like sort of like, oh man, I got to get this done, and the
Yes.
time, and that's
Yes.
scary.
Yeah,
Mhm,
my gunsmith saw the panic in my eyes 'cause I was like,
mhm,
"Something's wrong," and he's like, "We got it. It was
mhm,
fixed." So it was a huge blessing. He was phenomenal. But looking back, I needed to prioritize time with family, with friends, doing I mean, I'm a college age female. I should be out shopping and enjoying coffee dates and I mean not dates, but like dates with friends and no, that didn't happen this year. And I did achieve my goal, which I'm so thankful for. And right now it is coming a little bit of a cost because I am going through burnout really bad right now. But so far this month, it has been so great to decorate for Christmas and me going back to church regularly and hanging out with family and actually kind of feeling like a normal person and not just a competitor. So,
mhm.
yeah.
That's beautiful. I mean, I love to hear that,
Mm.
and I think that's sort of the reality. I have Matt Steiner that's gonna
Yeah.
be on next week, and
Yeah.
he had just put out a video with MDT. You know, they do a bunch of the
Mhm.
short
Yeah.
he
Mhm.
said, "What does it take to get to that next level?" And he had essentially said, "You have to fully embrace yourself in the community,"
Yeah.
right?
You really
And I think
do.
the telling, thing, it's like it goes
Mhm.
from a hobby to a profession or a
Yeah.
sport,
Yeah.
however and it
Mhm. Yeah.
um, and in
Mhm.
that way, right? I'm sure, and luckily, it's enjoyable work and it's fun work, and you're with
Yes.
friends, you're traveling,
Yes.
things like that. But I
Mhm.
definitely understand that. And
Mhm.
particularly when I was in college, my
Mhm.
one of my really good friends was he was on the world team for paintball. Um,
Okay.
and he played on three international teams. He was on Russia, Canada, and
Oh my
Australia
god.
and US. And so he was always traveling, right? I can remember, we'd sort of rotate who's picking him up for the airport, who's dropping him off, and how much fun can we have in the week that he'll be here, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I remember him getting, and he was super into fitness. And so it was
Mhm.
like, always moving, always going, and you sort of
Mhm.
like, when are you gonna catch your breath, right? Sort of thing.
Right.
And so I'm
Right.
glad to hear that you're sort of like in that phase right now. And this is a good
Mhm.
time, right? The winter, it feels
Yes.
like it's a good time to settle in,
Yeah.
watch the movies, throw a fire
Mhm.
on, things like
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
and obviously now you get to do the super relaxing podcast, which, you know, just
Here we
enough.
are. It's the
Uh,
best.
Sort of taking a step back, right? Can you walk
Mhm.
us through? You're talking a little bit about leading up to Worlds. Can you
Mhm.
sort of walk us through, like, you're going through this process
Mhm.
through this year leading into Worlds? What is
Mhm.
that looking like for you? Is you're sort of, you're maybe 6 months away, and you're thinking, okay, we're starting to prep for this.
Yeah. So I knew about halfway through 2024 that it was pretty much confirmed that I was on the team. And so, it was kind of always on in the back of my mind, like, all right, this is for sure gonna happen. We had our last team qualifier in February. The team was announced in March, I think. And pretty immediately, I ended up like first and foremost in January, I switched. So for the first 3 years of competing, I shot a Remix, and then in the 2024 season, I went to Voodoo, and in January, I went back to my Remix, and that was all with Worlds in mind. And then, there was already ammo testing happening in January and, continuing through March and April. And what's a little interesting is right before I left for my international trip in April, I shot a match. And I was sitting there and I was like, something doesn't feel right. Like my gun, like it did not feel right. And there were a few shots where I was like, I don't know why I didn't hit that, like, that's weird, but I just chalked it up as wind. I was like, "You know what? Windy day." I was over in Utah at a very windy range. I was like, "That's what's wrong. Wind." Then I went to Australia and New Zealand for 5 weeks, which was a phenomenal trip. During my time there, I ended up changing up some things with my rifle to help me, just fundamentally be a better shooter, which those ended up drastically helping me. And so when I came back in June, I jumped right into competing again and I shot a match in Texas where there was no wind, like absolutely no wind. And at this point, Worlds was 3 months away, and I was like, "Alright, final countdown." I was fairly sure that I had my ammo figured out and lot tested, like, I went down to the, testing center in Lapua, and I do that, 2 to 3 times a year anyways, but, this time it was with the intent to find ammo for Worlds, and so I was like, "Alright, I have 2 really solid lots, um, really good." Felt good about my ammo, wasn't questioning it whatsoever. Then I go to Texas, and it was that same feeling, something's not right. Something's not right, and something kind of panic started to set in, and it was the following week, I went over to Utah, where I'm really good friends with Paul Dallin, and I was telling him, I'm like, "Something's not right." So we just started testing a ton of ammo, because 'cause we're like, "Alright, ammo, It's throwing some flyers, not great groups. All right, sure, we'll do ammo. Well, then through a lot of testing, I mean, over 2,000 rounds of testing in 2 days, we discovered we're like, maybe it's something with the gun itself. Maybe there's a gouge. Maybe something happened when I was cleaning it. What could be going on? So I took it to my gunsmith. He took a look at it. Sure enough, there were some issues with the barrel that he fixed immediately. Well, at that point, we were 6 weeks away from Worlds. And so I ended up going back to Arizona, back to Lapua to do extra testing. Found my lot, shot great through it, all this type of stuff. And through all of this, when I had the questions of, wait, why am I missing? Why am I missing? I didn't have a clear answer, so I started doubting myself. And what a lot of people don't know is this season, I struggled with self image so bad because I thought that, I was becoming a better shooter, but why were my results not the best? Why would I go to a match and question why I missed? Because before I'd be like, oh, I missed because of this or this. And so this was all in July. And I started meeting with a mental management coach, um, which was so great. I was reading so many books, and getting my rifle fix was a huge confidence booster. So then, those last 6 weeks before Worlds felt like a completely different era than the previous 6 months because it felt like I tore everything down, just brushed everything to the foundation and rebuilt with new ammo. Not a new gun, right? But new aspects of the rifle that gained my confidence back. And I was building my mindset again. So I was like, all right, gun is on. I'm on. Win calls are, you're always improving on your win calls, let's be honest. But I was making some good choices with the win calls. And so, really, just before Worlds, it was so many practice sessions, going out in no wind, in tons of wind, sunny conditions, low light conditions. We knew that Worlds was going to be 90 seconds, so I was doing reps to prepare me for that. Um, I was refining how I was moving my bag. I laid it all out on the line because all that self doubt that I had, all of the questions I had, I wanted to prove wrong. And so by the time I left for Worlds, I was like, the amount of shots that I have put down range over the last 6 weeks is insane. And I mean, Worlds was great. Worlds was really good, but yeah, it
Pretty
was,
good for you. Well, there's a couple interesting things here that I'm
mhm,
generally curious.
yeah.
One is they're talking about your barrel.
Mhm,
When you started having these issues and you guys are
mhm,
working through it, were these
mhm,
issues you weren't able to see through bore scoping?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, there were issues that I
How were they able to how were you able to identify sort of what the issue
mhm.
was?
Yeah, so, first and foremost, there was a, gouge at the very, very, very end of my barrel that must have happened. It wasn't there, and then it was. So I d must have happened when I was cleaning. I don't know how it got there, and it was over the summer, like, in the first 3 months of having this barrel, it was not there, and then the tight spot of the barrel was an inch and a half from the front of the barrel, and then the, chamber was actually 50 thousandths too loose, and so if you put a round into the chamber, like, I could just get out with my fingernail. And my gun went from shooting 6-inch groups at 200 yards to 2.5-inch groups just from cutting off the end of my barrel, which then also took out the gouge, and then rechambering the rifle. So those three fixes completely fixed my rifle.
That's
And everything, like, and it was an immediate change. So, mhm,
That's interesting. So far as, a lot of work goes into,
mhm,
finding loads. I mean, obviously, you guys are looking for lots, right? But for, like,
yeah.
center fire or just
Mhm,
particularly F-class stuff, right? Building those loads up,
Mhm,
and then keeping the lot of bullets and the lot of brass and primers and keeping those all
mhm.
together. There's an interesting thing that happens in bench rest and F class where when they find this winning scenario, right, and
Mhm.
particularly with their barrel, they will
Yeah.
shoot a match, and if they win it, they take that barrel off, they put it aside with all of that stuff, and they just
Yeah.
keep it, and they start building
Mhm,
a new barrel up, and then
mhm.
in the future, if there's another big competition, they'll just screw it back on for that competition, take it back
Yes.
off. Do you do that, or is there that sort of thing happening in this discipline?
Ooh, that's a good question. I I could see some people doing that. I have heard that, some guys have a practice rifle and then a competition rifle, and, like, that match rifle is just honed in, refined, perfected, all type of stuff. With rimfire barrels, you can't you know, you can't burn them out, they don't die. I think, right, if there's a manufacturing issue or if something happens when you're cleaning and there is a gouge that could do other problems, like, it will appear like it died. Um, I I am in the process of building another rifle to have 2 complete setups of the rimfire rifle. Is that to have a match-only rifle and a practice rifle? Not necessarily, but, when I was caught 6 weeks before Worlds with a situation where I don't know I couldn't find another barrel, so it was either we hope and pray these, adjustments that we're making work, or else I'm gonna have to, like, ask friends around if I could borrow their barrel. And I never wanna be put in that situation again, and so I am building a second rifle to have in case anything were to happen or I'm questioning something, I have a backup rifle that is reliable and ready to go. I know if I shot more center fire, like, I don't shoot very much center fire, that's something I hope to change in the future. I don't think that's a bad idea to have a, specific match barrel versus, maybe a practice one. I think there are also a lot of strategies that you can look at it too, because I know some people will buy, say, like 2,000 bits of brass, 2,000 bullets, and reload for one barrel that's 2,000 rounds. And then as soon as that's done and the barrel's done, then they retire that barrel for matches. So I know there are a few ways that people go about their barrel life. And
It's very possible that this is more you see this more at bench and F because a
yeah,
lot of at that level, a lot of those
yeah.
guys don't shoot past 1,000 rounds on their barrels.
Right. Yeah.
And
Very
so,
true.
they're doing 200, 300 load development that only
Mhm.
leaves them with, 700, 600 rounds
Yeah.
left or whatever.
Hmm.
And then you go shoot a match and you're like, well, maybe I can get one or two more matches out of this, right?
Right.
And then what are you going to shoot it at your local range? Or no, you're probably going to put it away
Mhm.
and wait till the next nationals or the next, really, really big tournament.
Mhm.
So it would be interesting, right? Because and for
It would
all
be.
intents and purposes,
Yeah.
I would imagine that you could get another barrel and take your world barrel and take your world ammo and put it aside,
Mhm.
and that would serve the similar purpose. And now you're
Right.
reworking this new barrel, and now but you always know I can go back to this one, screw it on,
Yes.
and it's gonna hammer.
Mhm.
Right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's an interesting thing. So you're
Mhm.
sort of leading into worlds, and by this point, you've done a worlds before. You're a
Mhm.
seasoned traveler,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
What's that like for you as you and the team start to prep to go to the UK and then finally you guys you're on the plane, you're traveling, you guys are
Mhm.
arriving. What's that like for you?
Woo! Alright, that even though, like, it wasn't my first Worlds and that I've traveled a lot, like, it felt very nerve-wracking. Like, when I got on the plane, I don't wanna say I had a panic attack, cause that's very dramatic, but I became so nervous, like, I had tears in my eyes, the nerves just overtook my body, and, my family was being so encouraging, and they were just speaking truth into me and just lots of encouragement, and I mean, part of it is something. When I shot in Italy in 2023, I genuinely didn't know if I pursue the 2025 Worlds. I didn't. And it was, I was having a conversation with Paul Dowling at the very, very end of 2023 where we just looked at each other and like, we're gonna do it. Whatever it takes, we're gonna do it. And throughout the entire 2024 season, we were qualifying and all of this year, Paul and I have shot so many matches together, and it was just so much intention for 2 years, so much anticipation, so much planning, and when I got on that plane, even though we had team meetings and even though there was so much talk about it, it never felt very real until I got on the plane. Until, I asked the, um, flight attendants to make sure that my gun was on the plane because I was about to go compete at a world championship. I was like, "Whew, okay, yeah, we're doing this. Yep, let's
Mhm.
buckle up. We're gonna fly to England right now."
Mhm.
And it was a huge weight lifted off my shoulders once I got to the range. Once I was able to shoot in country, definitely the tension and the nerves really subsided, and I was able to get excited and start enjoying being there, and I started seeing international friends and meeting new friends, and even though in the back of my head it was always, "You're here to compete, you're here to compete, you're here to achieve your goal," how could one not get excited to talk to new friends and see old friends? And so, like, the 3 days leading up to Worlds, it was really like, "Okay, enjoy the process.
Mhm.
Enjoy being here, soak it all in because you never know what the outcome is going to be. And if the outcome is not what I hoped for, I want to make sure that I still enjoyed the process because I'd be very disappointed if I didn't." And yeah, it kind of at that point then, I think it became very second nature. Going to the range, getting out your gun, shooting, figuring out your ballistics, your speeds. I would go to the range every day and zero or practice, figure out what my speeds were in hotter temperatures, colder temperatures, and it just felt like second nature, which really, really helped. And then I felt very fluid. And I was very, very excited for sure, and yeah, then competing happened, and that was so tense.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the preparation that goes into this, right?
Mhm.
And the work
Yeah.
that you're doing. That the Lapua testing center, that's a deep cut, right? That's like
Mhm.
not a lot of people know that that's there. Not a lot of people know what's going on. I mean,
Mhm.
you like
Mhm.
the whole capstone really community and
Mhm.
how like the amazing shooters across all disciplines
Mhm.
that develop out of there, particularly even like Olympians, is
Yeah.
amazing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so clearly, if you don't know that, and now you guys do know, you can sort of get a gist of like how much work is really going into this, right? On top of
Mhm.
like, that's not to say like everybody's putting a ton of rounds,
Mhm.
down preparing for this, things like that. But I look at this and I talk about this a lot because we're on the cusp for
Mhm.
particularly for PRS for
Mhm.
becoming a legitimate sport, right?
Yes.
And what I mean by
Mhm.
that is I mean that we treat it like a sport, right? Like you're talking about
Mhm.
sports psychologists, we're talking
Yeah.
about nutritionists, we're talking
Mhm.
about personal trainers specifically designed for implementation for shooting,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I really think we're right there where we're starting to
Mhm.
see implement those strategies into
Mhm.
what they're doing, and we're starting to see the impact of it. And I
Yeah.
think honestly, I don't know everything you did, but you're talking a little bit about it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so you're doing all of these things, and it's
Mhm.
starting to feel more and more like something very, very serious, right?
Mhm. Yes.
And then you go, and I could tell you, like, I went back and forth. I'm like, okay, should I go film this event for the entire thing? Because I also
Yeah.
was filming the European F class championship
Oh,
2 weeks
oh,
out.
okay.
And so I was like, and then I had to fly there, and then it's a 3 hour
Mhm.
drive. trying to figure it all out.
Mhm,
And I was getting excited because I was like, this is a really big deal for these
mhm.
people. And it's really exciting to see this for them. Now, I will
Yeah.
say with all honesty, and I say this to everybody, that rimfire is the most infuriating sport discipline for me because so competitive and you can tell people are competitive, but then
Mhm,
you realize they're all so nice. Everybody's helping each other, helping like telling them like, "Oh, you should
mhm,
do this, you should do that," or this is what I'm
mhm.
and I'm like, "Are you guys even competing right now?" It's such a weird dynamic, right? And it's
Yes.
so nice, it's so welcoming, and
Mhm,
particularly as a spectator, right? It's the
mhm.
what I would recommend to people because it just feels like you're in a cool atmosphere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't feel like everybody's being mean to each other or
Mhm.
bumping elbows or,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And so that's really cool. And so it's for me to see you guys start to shoot. And granted, you
Mhm,
guys were already day 3 when I had showed up, so people were pretty relaxed in. But
mhm,
definitely like it's so fun to see you guys in your element and then the
mhm,
best of the best doing what they're doing. And
mhm,
I'd love to sort of get your opinion on the course of fire and
mhm,
things like that. But wow, did the time seem fairly difficult on some of those. And the amount of people that weren't clearing or finishing
mhm.
or things like that. And so,
Yes.
you're there, you've done your
Mhm,
practice, you're ready to go. I think
mhm.
the first few days was the horse track, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And what was that like?
Whew. Okay. Um, so I let's see. So our practice days were all in the trees. And so I don't want to say there was a little bit of disappointment that we are starting on the motocross track because I was like, oh, this isn't what I practice in. Shucks. Right. But I was excited because they made a very unique course of fire. The fact that they put the props along the track and then you shot into the hills and like into the trees. I did really like that because that did provide a more challenging element for wind. Like on that first day in the morning, we had some very challenging winds that were kind of swirling a little bit. And I mean, I know on the apex stage, heck, people were struggling bad on that stage because the wind was just swirling in these trees. And I think the I really loved the props. They did such a good job with the props at Worlds. And when I look at A Course of Fire, I will be honest, I become very disappointed when I see wobbly or gimmicky props. And that is not for the argument of, "Oh, well, you can't shoot off of a gimmicky prop." I can make a lot of props stable. I can give me a wobbly prop, and I will do my best, right? But it's always a concern in the back of my mind, if it's a wobbly prop, is it gonna be the same amount of wobble as the first shooter to the very last shooter? You know? And so I was so incredibly, honestly thankful that the props were so solid and so well thought of at Worlds. And, because with so many competitors shooting off of them, they needed to be solid. Plus, and you said it earlier, with the 90-second stages, I mean, my bag, like my rear support bag, it gets abused. I am more gentle with it when I have more time, but heck, on those 90-second stages, I was moving and grooving and not being the nicest to my bag. That also affects the props. So if they had wobbly props, it would just not been good. So I know that was a feedback of so many people of how solid the props were. Motocross, really good. They had some cool panning stages, which I really enjoyed. Um, I'm gonna say this knowing that I did not clean the course of fire. I would say some targets were a little bit large, some were very appropriately sized. Um, Now, if we had massive wind, obviously I would not be saying that. So take that with a grain of salt, please. Um, but I did also like how the match director put in thought of a lot of the targets were hit the big than hit the small, because that ensured that everybody, still got impacts, and then, you know, um, I guess, like, the more advanced guys would be able to get more impacts. So I did think that was very good on their part, and I'm trying to think if there were any major. I mean, I did enjoy day 1, for sure. I think the wind was very nice to everybody the entire week. Didn't rain, thankfully,
Thankful.
and I know. Yeah, and I am gonna be biased, I enjoyed the second half of the competition in the trees. I liked the challenge of target acquisition, and I rarely shoot in trees like that. So, to me, that was a really fun challenge for me to be in, so I'm gonna be biased, I liked day 2 a little bit better.
And I mean, what a range, right? That the Midlands shooting center, I think
Mhm,
that's the correct name for it.
mhm,
I mean, wow. I wrote a couple articles around the event,
mhm.
and I just did my very best to not refer to it as Jurassic Park because that's what it felt like. It literally felt like you were walking through Jurassic Park, and I never really seen anything like it, right? It was
Mhm.
quite it was just a really impressive, right? I mean,
It
you
was.
sort of expect that you're gonna be in some woods somewhere
Mhm,
and things like that, but this felt like you were, like, at the golf course equivalent of
mhm.
shooting, right?
Yeah,
Where specific stages and stuff like in these, well-groomed areas and everything's
mhm,
really solid and nice, and
mhm,
you're shooting down, and it's, like,
mhm.
quite impressive.
It
Um
was. Yeah,
Mhm,
and it was a good there were challenges of shooting, up angles, because I know, depending on the angle, it can affect your elevation, so I know that was, like, a big question for a lot of people is, how's your elevation going to be? And, yeah, I mean, I don't even think we had there was 1 target failure, and then there was, like, 1 KYL that was a little sticky, but for how many shots were fired on those targets, the fact that there weren't any target malfunctions except for 1 was phenomenal, so kudos to the guys for that. I mean, was it my favorite course to fire? I'm gonna be honest and say no. It was good, do not
mhm,
get me wrong, but I wish I'm a fast shooter, but there were um, so I think there were 20 targets that I didn't engage. 11, no, I'm sorry. There were 11 targets that I didn't engage because I timed out, which never happens for me. And so I do think that some of the stages um, were maybe a little too demanding for time
mhm.
or too demanding with movement for the time that we were given.
Yeah, I was sort of wondering that as well, and when I talked to Michael about, his sorta the same thing, I saw that
Mhm.
particularly at the MDT stage, and I sorta said the experience as a whole was that when someone did clean it, like, everybody somehow knew, and it was like you could just hear it, like, right? Like,
Yes.
everybody was cheering because they're like
100 and
"Wow,
clapping
like,
and
that's
doing
that's
yes.
really impressive that that happened,"
Mhm,
right? And
mhm,
so I did think that that was really interesting. It felt very, very demanding on that front, but because I'm not a world class rimfire shooter, I couldn't really gauge if that was appropriate or not, or
mhm,
if or whatever, right? Maybe that's the
mhm.
point of world, right? Maybe it's supposed to be that
Yeah,
difficult.
and I mean, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I mean, it is a world championship. It is supposed to be a difficult match, and it was. It really was. I mean, I think to also give an example too, I mean, there were some stages where I finished with 15 to 18 seconds left, and then, there were times where I left points potentially on the table because I timed out, and on the MDT stage, I only got 8 shots off, which is crazy to go back and look at, but yeah, I mean, there are some stages it just went like a breeze, and
the
MDT
the
not so much.
sort of like prop design and that is really interesting to me because the Leopold stage had gravel, not gravel, it had a what do you call it, bark it had bark
Yes.
underneath.
Mhm.
And some people were so aggressively moving side to side on that,
Mhm.
that it was essentially lowering the ground
Mhm.
by, like, a couple inches,
It
really.
was, yeah, I
And
mean,
I
yeah.
sort of thought that was interesting because it's, like, not I guess that's part of it, but it's, like, not everybody is shooting the same thing,
Mhm,
right? That's sort of what
mhm.
I thought. And I remember that
Yeah.
really being, like, interesting because when I watched a lot of the teens
Mhm.
shoot, they would have, something to give them to be underneath because they were so short, right?
Mm.
You could put, like, whatever it was,
Mhm.
something to raise them up.
Yeah.
And so, that's really interesting because, like, well, that's what the reason I thought, like, everything was so well done and built so well
Mhm.
that it felt like that, but I did feel like a couple things I'm like, "If someone short goes after this person, I might have a little more trouble." I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know,
Yeah,
I guess you could maybe go smooth it out, but I didn't really see anybody doing that because they were so focused on preparing to shoot.
yeah, that is it is a very good point, and I know I shot let's see, the loophole stage would have been maybe my 7th stage of the day or 8th, so definitely quite a few shooters had gone before me. I don't know if somebody went in, like, after, my day of shooting and smoothed out the bark before the open guys and youth shot, I'm not sure. If anything, if they didn't, it kind of gave them a little bit of an advantage because they had that little bit of a dip. I don't know, and I mean, once the clock starts, it is you do what you have to do to get those impacts. And so I know that guys weren't being gentle. I wasn't being gentle. I mean, I slammed down on that bark so hard. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't recall anybody, complaining about that I mean, there were a lot of complaints on that stage just from it being so much movement, but I enjoyed it. I had so much fun on that stage, but it actually was they did a really good job to ensure that like, I'm 5'2", like, I'm very short, and there are some times where I'm at a match where I'm like, "Do you have a pallet? Do you have a 4 by 4 I could stand on?" Like, I'm sorry, I've been trying to grow taller for, 8 years and it hasn't worked. So could you help me out? And they did have pallets available, and I did ask to use one on one of the stages. And it was like one of those where it was right there. Like it could have been okay, but since I was shooting at such a small target, I didn't want to take any chances. Plus, at that point, I mean, every point is crucial, and I didn't know where I was standing at that point, so I was like, "No, I need that palette just to be sure."
Yeah, totally. So,
Mhm,
I think I got to film maybe one, you know, where you shot, and
mhm,
filmed the whole thing, and I remember thinking when you shot it, that seemed really, really good. Right? Like, just, like, watching it being thinking, like, that seems like what everybody is supposed to be doing, right? And I didn't really know because it was, I had caught you fairly early when I started filming, but I had
okay.
sort of seen enough people and seen, people, like, how long it was
Mhm,
taking people to do stuff,
mhm,
this was sort of like the stage to the left of Leopold. So it was, you walked in, it was quite a long stage, and it was,
mhm.
you lay down on the ground, and
Oh, and
then
then we did um, fallen tree, right? Like, it's
yeah,
3
the
different
fallen
positions.
tree, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And, I remember watching and just being like, "That seemed really good." I think that's how what it's supposed to look like. And there were a couple that I watched like that, right? When I watched Michael shoot, I was like, "That
Oh,
was really, really good. That was
oh,
very fast."
yeah.
When I watched
Yeah.
Matt shoot,
Mhm,
Greg as well,
mhm,
he won seniors, I believe,
mhm.
Greg, right? Yeah.
Good
Um,
deal.
or Dave, sorry, Dave, last name starts with an O, I think.
Ostrowski.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember, like, seeing a couple people and being like, "That seems really, really good," and then other
Mhm.
people and being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that this is not gonna be a good day for you. You're having some troubles." Right? So, it's sort of like the fun thing of being, like, the photographer and videographer is, like,
Yeah.
I get to sort of watch it as, like, a spectator,
Mhm.
which was really,
Yeah.
really fun for me, and then, I get to learn from it and I get to see it because I'm not prepping and I'm not messing around
Absolutely,
with
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
Um, but for you guys, right? You go, you're doing your shooting. You're liking this back end. You know,
mhm.
how when do you know that you won?
Ooh, like, when did I know that I won Worlds?
Yeah.
So
And there must have
I
been like a pretty good like people knew you were fairly close, right?
yeah. Well, so what's great is and anybody that you talk to that went to Worlds knows just how close you become with their squad. And really it was kind of a joint squad effort to not look at scores. Like it was one of those where
Mm,
we just didn't want to know. We just wanted to encourage each other and where the cards fell,
mm,
we can only control how we shoot. And, if somebody had a better day than me, so be it, they did. Congrats to them, right? And I knew that the scores were going to be live, and that is not something I built into my mental process. And actually, the first day of competing, I was there with my whole family, my mom, dad, and my sister, and they actually didn't even look at scores either. And so when I was done with the day one, I was ahead of the next lady by 9 points, which I was so stoked for because actually, the first stage of the day, I got a 7 out of 12 on. Like, it was just I was like, "Oh, please no, please no, please no. Like, this cannot be my match." I ended up having a great comeback and ended the day super strong. And so I was like, "Alright, cool, 9 points." And my goal for day 2 of competing for me was to maintain that 8, 9-point lead because I knew that if I struggled on a stage, I felt like I wouldn't really get below, like, a 5. I was close, I got a 6 on the MDT stage. I was close. Well, what happened is I felt like I was maintaining my lead fairly good until the MDT stage. And but even then, like, even when I was worried, I was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, calm down. You're still having a good day. One bad stage does not define the rest of your match. Absolutely not. Let this light the fire in your soul and go dominate the next stage." And I think I ended up having, like, 2 or 3 cleans in a row or something, and I had a really great day for the rest of the time. Well, I didn't know this, but my family and then we had 2, squad supporters. So, the Canadian senior that I had on my squad had a supporter who we knew really well or know really well, and then the 2 Brits that were on my squad had a supporter as well, that's a really good friend. Well, all 5 of those guys were looking at the scores, and at that point, some of my squad mates were looking at the scores, so they all knew my score, but they stayed silent. None of them gave up a peep at all. Well, I shot my second to last stage, and, like, immediately my mom comes up to me, she's like, "Put your headphones on," because I listen to music between stages, and that sent panic through me. I was like, "Why? What's going on?" I cleaned this stage, I don't get what's going on. She's like, "Just put them on." Well, I had to walk from stage 20 all the way down to stage 11, and so I was like, "Oh, well, maybe there's some drama going on or some arguments," and so she just doesn't want me to get caught up in it. So I was like, "Okay, that's what it is for sure." Well, no. The whole squad started talking about how much I was ahead, and my mom didn't want me to hear that before I shot my last stage. And so I go to my last stage, and this is when I had a gut feeling that I had it. After having a good comeback after MDT, I was like, "I think I still have it, like, I really do." But I was like, "This is gonna be a lot of movement on this next stage. Camden, get a solid 10. 10 out of 12. Ideally, I want to clean, but come on. With all this movement, you're tired, you're exhausted, just do it." And so I finished the stage and I see some movement to my side where it was Josh Botha from Canada. He was filming me and he said, "Camden, you did it. You're the ladies world champion." And I turn and I like look at him in pure shock. I'm like, "What?" And he was like, "I'm serious, you won." And then it just hit me, and I started crying. And I turned around, there was my family, we're giving hugs, and then somebody yelled out, "17 points." And I was like, "I didn't get 17 on this stage." And they're like, "No, you won by 17 points." And that just brought on more tears. And it truly was, I had no idea that I was winning until I walked up to my last stage, and I just had this little gut feeling, but I was not about to, you know, just take it for granted and be, "Oh, cool, I won." I was like, "No, we're grinding until the very end," and yeah, I was still in shock, so
Well, I think mom's the real VIP here, right? I think she held it all together for you. That's I love to
she
hear it.
did,
She
yes,
did
well
great. What
mhm.
was that last stage that you shot?
It was all the rocks. Do you
Okay,
remember that?
I got
Yeah, there were 3 targets,
it.
um, and from, like, 3 rocks, you shot at target 1, 3 rocks, you shot at target 2, and then, like, the last 3, 'cause I think it was 9 positions, 12 shots, and then you shot at a long bomb target for the last one. So, I think I timed out. I got 11 out of 12 shots off, and I missed my very first shot, so then I hit the next 10.
So
Mhm,
you win, right? Obviously,
mhm,
like that's a cool experience. I got to do some photos and filming at the award ceremony.
mhm.
I wish I would have brought a flash because I didn't realize it was going to run into the dark. But
Yeah.
it went pretty good. Everybody seemed like they're having fun. You
Mhm,
leave, you come back. What does it feel like to be a world champion? I mean, a U.S. world champion along with every other
mhm,
sport, every other, thing.
mhm.
What does that feel like?
Um, I think at first, it just kinda felt like a relief almost, um, that it was over, just to be completely honest, after so much anticipation. And, I mean, I based most decisions with Worlds in mind. I mean, and, not taking certain college courses or not going on certain trips because of Worlds.
Mhm,
And knowing it was over, I was like, "Oh, it was all worth it." All those decisions, it was worth it. And unfortunately, there were some things that happened when I got back that for a little while kind of stole the momentum and the joy and the celebration of winning gold. And so that's something that I've been doing recently is just really embracing, like, wow, okay, now that all the emotion has died down, I can take a step back and be like, yeah, I shot good. I still made a few mistakes at the match. Don't get me wrong, but I did shoot good, and it was by the Lord's strength I was able to go out there and win, and it was everything was worth it because I walked away a world champion.
mhm,
And and I'm so thankful that if there's ever, like a history book or, like something where, that's maybe a little bit dramatic, but about precision rifle, they talk about the world championships and how successful they are to grow the sport and to grow the community, and knowing that I'm a part of that. I'm a part of this growth. I'm a part of this community in such a large way, and I'm also a champion. That my name is written next to Michael Blackburn's. And, and watching him shoot was so incredible, and seeing him get his medal, and then when I went up there and I heard everybody cheering for me, like, that was so surreal, just like, "Wow, here we are in England with people from around the world speaking different languages, all having the same passion, and I get to celebrate with them." It's so cool. And yeah, it's a I think sometimes I maybe put a little bit of my worth in it, but right now it's whether or not I would have gotten gold, I'm not defined by it.
mhm.
But being able to look up and see my trophies and my medals just reminds me of how blessed I am for my family's support, for my sponsor's support, for the Lord giving me the strength when I need it the most. And, I think I look at my medals differently now than what I did a few months ago when I first got them. And it's all a process. It's a process of jumping back into normal life and knowing that planning for Worlds in England is over.
Mhm.
Mhm,
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, right? Because sort of like you said, this is a thing
mhm,
you've achieved, but it's not necessarily who you are. And I think that's a really great way to put it, particularly for a
mhm,
lot of people who are putting a lot of pressure on themselves to be that next world champion, right? And as they're prepping for that sort of
mhm,
experience, and if you've ever competed in any sport, the goal is, I hope, for everybody to want to win, right? But if you
yeah,
don't, you have to gain an experience out of it, right?
mhm,
And it's something
absolutely.
that's supposed to be enjoyable.
Yeah,
Um, I remember two things here. First thing, I'm lucky enough to be in a region where there's quite a bit of like old school national team members
mhm,
and things like that.
yeah,
And I talked to a guy once and I told him, like, he's like, well, what's your goals? And I told him, well, I'd like to make a world team, like to make a
yeah,
national team for F class.
mhm,
And I told him, obviously, like, I like to win a world championship. And he's like, oh, you don't want to win a world championship. And I was like, why? And he's like, once you win a world championship, it's like everybody is like, he said it switches. People are sort
mhm,
of against you. Like,
mhm,
and granted, this was a different time. This is a different discipline. I don't think
mhm,
22 sort of like this. And I always thought, well, that's a really interesting way to think about it, right?
mhm,
But I also think you as a competitor, you're going to, or even just as a person, you're just
mhm,
going to find a way to find joy in the things that are happening in your life, right?
yeah,
And you're not going to let the negative things sort of bring you down because haters
mhm,
going to hate. That's just the reality of life, right?
exactly,
Yeah, that's
yes,
that's just going to happen. But
mhm,
in contrast, I asked Michael, I said, "What was it like going back?" And he said, "I went back and was a farmer." Like that's he's like I thought it would be different. I thought it would feel different. Like I don't know. And I said, well, like, are sponsors reaching out? Like, or is anyone? It's like, like, really, I just went back and I was a farmer. And I was like, that's such an interesting for you, right?
mhm,
And I sort of thought, well, maybe it's because it's Australia, right? It's not the US, right? Like for
mhm,
you, has that? I mean, I know you have sponsors, but is
mhm,
it like at this point? I always think companies, this is the time to reach out and to try to make these deals, right? Is that
yeah.
happening? Is that a thing? Like, what does that
Um,
look
actually, I've been asked this question a few times, like, "All right, like, what sponsors do you have lined up?" And, um, did it happen? Like, it's true, I came back and I was a college student, I was a daughter, I was a sister, and I jumped back into work. 'Cause, I took those X amount of days off, well, I had to get back to work. Um I will say there is a new sponsorship opportunity coming in 2026, but it has not come from my win at Worlds. I've been growing my relationship with this company for over a year, really just as friends and knowing people within the company. And I've had some great conversations with the owner and with people. And no, I mean, I haven't been, I guess, pursued by companies. I will say that I've had an incredible opportunity with, actually, a few opportunities with Burris that, now it's cool that I'm able to bring value to their team in a different way. Before I was able to say, like, I've, claimed X amount of national titles, but now, they can say, oh, well, here she's running our scope world champion. And, it doesn't define me. They would have still loved and supported me, even if I didn't podium. But for them, I do bring that, different value. And I mean, actually, will be honest, after some gear changes I made this year, like, I've walked away from a sponsorship just because I think in all of the preparation I did and all the shooting and all the practicing, I love that company still. So loved and appreciated their support, but to better my technical ability and my fundamentals, I had to go a different direction. And that was hard, but I also knew it was something I had to do. And so I'm thankful that we still have a great relationship. And I think that's so beautiful about companies supporting shooters that even if people come and go, for the most part, right? I'm sure there are some sticky situations, but I think for the most part, people or companies just want to see the sport succeed. And if you're with the company for a season, it was meant to be. And things won't last forever. So it'll come in seasons. But I agree with Michael. Unfortunately, there weren't crowds waiting for us at the airport, there weren't flyovers or anything like that, but it was just, all right, we're jumping back into normal life. And I just get to claim a world title now on my profiles on social media.
Yeah, on your resume, that goes on there too,
It's
right?
true. It's
Although
true.
at this point, I would imagine that, like, if you wanted to stay in the shooting industry, you're fairly well known
Mhm.
that, you know, you're already it's pretty good. You don't need to even put it on
Yeah.
your resume. But,
Yeah.
yeah, it's such an interesting thing, and that's really the outcome of outlier sports, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It's like it's not like that. There's no parade, there's no most people don't know. I mean, even the local news is not covering anything. But I
Mhm.
will say, and I do, a different capacity from content creation where I do sort of
Mhm.
some work and consulting with companies in the industry. I
Yeah.
tell them like this is the time. This is the ROI, right? Like this is where you invested and do something
Mhm.
with that, right? And if you are a company that's looking to, you know, partner with one of the best in the world, this is the time
Mhm.
you reach out. Congratulations.
That's
That
true.
was amazing. We'd love the opportunity to talk with you about
Mhm.
you testing this product to see if it would work for you, right?
Right.
Uh,
Mhm.
I wish I would see more of that. I think
I
companies, I don't know if
feel
they're scared or whatever it is,
Mhm.
but, I
Mhm.
do see more of that in the industry.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I mean, I've been approached by a company to test something, not out of if you like this, it's going to result in a sponsorship or this, that, the other. It was more of a with how many rounds you shot and basically your experience, could you help us out with this? And I think that's very admirable for a company to do that, to get feedback from the people who are putting in the hours upon hours. Because, yes, companies do their testing. Yes, they do their research and their homework. Absolutely. But still not going to be the same as, a Michael Blackburn or me or somebody else that has poured so much into just range time.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, but I'm excited to see it to continue to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that
Absolutely.
both with the companies and with the
Mm-hmm.
athletes, as a whole has been really cool to see, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see where the future looks. Have you thought about that? Like what that's going to look like for you?
Oh, um, honestly, that's a really great question that I have been asking myself a lot. With how much was sacrificed this year, it is hard for me to say, oh, I'm going to go for the 2027. Like, making that commitment right now feels pretty daunting.
Mhm,
It would be incredible to represent my company to my country. It would be incredible to represent the companies that have supported me. But just the time and energy that I put in the last 2 years, it would be a lot. Um, I know that in the 2026 season, I want to shoot matches and shoot disciplines that will bring joy back into shooting. Not that I don't enjoy shooting PRS, because I do, and I love the rifle that's right behind me. That is my pride and joy. But I had to say no to some matches this year for the sake of Worlds, and so I wanna be able to go out and shoot center fire, maybe at this point, my goal is to shoot maybe some PCC or some 3-gun, maybe use some shotgun. I mean, I've been newly introduced to 5-stand. Okay, that's fun. And, just enjoying pulling the trigger and letting it lighten my soul again versus having the pressure of competing at such a high level. And so, um, yeah, the future is a little bit unknown right now, but by no means am I stepping away from competing. I love competing way too much to step away. I think it may just look a little bit different just for the sake of trying new things and also being challenged in new areas and gaining an appreciation for other shooting disciplines.
I really think you'd enjoy some F-class shooting, a little bit of target shooting, but where
Yeah,
I think it would be really fun to see is some ELR, right?
that
Let's
would
get
be
you out there to Italy, to New Zealand, and
up there. Take me.
and get you out there and have you doing
Mhm.
taking some shots, right? I mean, it would be in contrast, right? The rifle would be bigger than you, I think.
I know, honestly, it would be.
Would be fun. So that would be pretty cool. Before we go, I
Mhm.
do always like to give an opportunity, and I think this is really important. Can you walk us through the sponsors that helped you get where you were, the rifle that you ran, sort of
Yeah,
that overcompassing, thing? I always tell people from from the bottom up or whatever works for you.
sure.
But this is the time to, let us know if we want to copy what you're doing, that's the time, or if we just want to show some appreciation for the sponsors that are out there supporting the community.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess I'll first go over my rifle build. This is what I ran at Worlds, the red chassis. So it is first and foremost, it says Surmount Arms MX Action with a Mueller Works. Originally it was a 25-inch, 1 and 13th twist. Then it is a Trigger Tech Diamond two-stage trigger, a Burris XTR Pro scope with the SCR2 reticle. Then I'm using a spur mount. I have an MDT bipod, OBI link system, and I think that's it. I think that is.
Any
I'm like,
bag sponsor, clothes sponsor, anything like that?
right? Yeah, and so then my sponsors that are not you can't see on the rifle. So I mean, shout out to Burris, MDT, OBI, Trigger Tech. Well, Trigger Tech doesn't sponsor me. I was gifted this trigger through Kiwi Precision, Lapua, because they did support me this year. DI Precision, Harless Precision, Real Avid. I use all their cleaning products, so they kept me clean and going this year. I used Weebad bags as well as Dranger bags. I just picked up a Celtic Precision bag, so that'll be exciting to try in the new year. And then I'm also supported by Eberly Stock.
Love it. That's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and if anybody wants to follow your journey, where can they do that at?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Facebook. So my Instagram is just Camdyn Powers, all one word, all lowercase, and then on Facebook is Camdyn Powers as well.
Real easy to find.
Mhm.
Just look
Easy.
world champion, and you guys should be good to go. So we appreciate you being on.
Thank
What a
you
great
so much.
insight into the experience, the
Mhm.
training, everything that goes into this sport that you're helping grow and develop. Thank you so much for that. For all of you guys that are listening, if you like what we're doing, give a like, give a comment, give a share. It goes a long way to growing the community. And again, if you want somebody on or there's a company that you think should be featured, let us know. Remember, this is your podcast. I'm just the host. Get out to the range, take the shot, and we'll see you guys next time.